Hey everybody, what is going on? This is Cypher again with another episode of the Crowdsourced Politics News Roundup, and I am so glad you all could join us today. A little late to the start because I was having problems with my green screen. Put in a new light above me, so it's got a different kind of color temperature to it, and it seems to change a little bit depending on the day. So I had to fiddle with that, and that's why we were late. Get started. What else we got going on? Well, oops, I meant to pause that. Sorry for the extra loudness. So what else we got going on? Well, we got other things that we're going to be doing. We're I'm trying to reach out to a couple of people to see if they want to talk about criminal justice reform, police reform, and the like, and how to actually, handle crime and stuff. Wouldn't mind talking to maybe actual justice warrior Sean Fitzgerald, see if he would want to talk about actual policy prescriptions that he sees to help with dealing with crime as well as police transgressions, especially after seeing his last few talks about it. I think there might be some fruitful stuff there. So I reached out to him. We'll see how that one goes, but no promises on that. Still looking to get on more modern day debates, so reached out to modern day debates as well to see if there's anything that they're interested in doing and having me on the program. We're looking for that. And then also we are a bit behind on editing and things like that, so sorry there hasn't been a new YouTube video put up yet. If you have an editor, if you know an editor that is reasonably priced, I am very willing to pay them and then make some sort of revenue sharing agreement should we ever manage to get into revenue sharing. But yes, so if you are an editor or know an editor who is wanting to make some money on the side, about 4 hours of work, about, we'll say 6 hours of work a month, a little bit, at least minimum. Let me know and send them my way. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with the show. Congress, so let's get it started, everybody. Congress and SCOTUS are on summer recess this month, but the news cycle continues like a fire hose, with former President Donald Trump's second federal indictment taking up much of the oxygen this past week. There's also the impact of the GOP manufactured debt ceiling crisis on America's credit rating, a look at America First Legal, and some gerrymandering stuff happening in Wisconsin. There's a lot to cover, so let's begin with updates on Russia's war in Ukraine on the 526th day of the invasion. So Russia's forces have made no headway along the front lines, but are entrenched in heavily mined areas they control, making it difficult for Ukrainian troops to move east and south, per reporting from The Guardian. Deputy Ukrainian Defense Minister Hanna Maliar said Russia forces had tried quite persistently to halt our advances in the Bakhmut sector, and without much success. Russia's forces, she wrote on the Telegram messaging app, were beefing up reserves and equipment in 3 areas further north where heavy fighting has also been reported in recent weeks. In further reporting from The Guardian, the UK's Minister of Defense has said Ukraine's counteroffensive is being hindered by Ukraine's plant life. In its daily intelligence briefing, it noted that, quote, underground regrowth across the battlefield of southern Ukraine is likely one factor contributing to the general slow progress of combat in the area. The land in the combat zone has been left fallow for 18 months, with the return of weeds and shrubs accelerating under these warm conditions. They said. The extra cover helps camouflage Russian defensive positions and makes defensive minefields harder to clear. In further news, the European Union has warned developing countries that Russia is offering cheap grain to create new dependencies by exacerbating economic vulnerabilities and global food insecurities, according to a letter by Reuters. According to a letter seen by Reuters on Wednesday. EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell wrote the group of 20 countries this week to urge them to speak, quote, with a clear and unified voice, push Moscow to resume the grain deal and to stop targeting Ukraine agricultural infrastructure. Ukraine's prime minister has said that the country is considering the possibility of ensuring ships going through a, quote, grain corridor. Russia attacked Ukraine's main inland port on Wednesday, across the Danube River from Romania, sending global food prices higher as it ramps up its use of force to prevent Ukraine from exporting its grain. The attacks destroyed buildings in Ishmael, and halted ships as they prepared to arrive there to load up with Ukrainian grain, in defiance of Russia's de facto blockade of Ukraine's Black Sea port. The Ishmael port has since served as a main alternative route out of Ukraine for grain exports. Kyiv reportedly said that the attacks damaged 40,000 tons of food product. President Zelensky has said Russia's attacks on the port's infrastructure show Moscow is intent on creating a global catastrophe with a crisis in food markets, prices, and supplies. And this is probably partly true. This is an effort to make the world stop helping Ukraine with its war defense against Moscow, and also as a means of cutting off money going to Ukraine from its ability to export food. So this makes total sense. This makes strategic sense from the Russian perspective. And I don't really think that we can fault them, don't get me wrong, but to not have seen this coming is a bit of kind of why didn't you see this coming? You know, if you didn't see Russia that was going to do this, then I don't know if you've ever paid attention to military fights or exercises or anything of the like, but cutting off a nation's ability to earn money during a war is high on the agenda. So this should have been accounted for and taken into consideration, even if Russia did have that deal with the rest of the world to continue exports of grain. and like to the rest of the world, particularly in the global south. But will that affect U.S. prices of food? Probably not too much, simply because the U.S. has the ability to feed itself, and much of its crops are exported. So I wouldn't expect food prices to go up too much with this. Maybe 3%, if that, of food grain stuff. But it will probably impact it as food tries to find the highest dollar cost. So don't be surprised if food prices do go up a little bit, but I don't expect it to be a spike like it is experiencing in the rest of the world, considering that the majority of food the U.S. produces is exported. So there is that to note. So continuing on, quote, this is from Zelensky, quote, "For the Russian state, this is not just a battle against our freedom and against our country," Zelensky said Wednesday in his nightly video address. Continuing on, he stated, quote, "Moscow is waging a battle for a global catastrophe. In their madness, they need world food markets to collapse. They need a price crisis. They need disruption in supplies." Which is probably true. For his part, Turkey's President Erdogan urged Vladimir Putin to reopen talks on the failed Black Sea grain deal he had helped broker just last year. If this is something that we reported on and said that if it holds, then honestly, Erdogan probably deserves to be recognized globally as some sort of like deal maker, potentially even as to the point of preventing catastrophe across much of the global south. This did fail, but if he's able to bring them back to the negotiating tables and Russia again stops bombing Ukrainian grain exports, win for everybody. So there is that. Zelensky said Wednesday he hoped a Ukraine peace summit could be held this autumn, and that this weekend talks in Saudi Arabia were a stepping stone towards that goal. So the war is possibly not winding down yet, but there might be an exit strategy here. He told Ukrainian diplomats in a speech published on the president's website that almost 40 countries would be represented at the meeting in Jeddah on August 5th and 6th. For their part, the Russian government has passed a series of bills last month to significantly expand the pool of men eligible for military service, according to Business Insider. So this means that the Russian military has tried to draft every able-bodied man, and they're going to continue to expand that, so they're probably going to include other people. Let's look into it. So the laws come as the country looks to address its increasing personnel problems, while avoiding another full-scale mobilization. Russia is facing mounting manpower shortages even after President Putin announced the mobilization of 300,000 reservists in one fell swoop last fall, prompting tens of thousands of Russian men to flee. Now, the Russian government is looking for new ways to increase its military numbers without sparking civilian backlash or cannibalizing its own economy. 1 year of military service was previously required. Start that over. 1 year of military service was previously required by Russian men ages 18 to 27, with conscription held twice a year. But starting in 2024, that call-up category will be extended by 3 years, which will significantly broaden the pool of young men who are eligible for Russia's 1 year of compulsory military service. Quote, "This gives Russia more latitude on who it can pull into the fight without taking people who are producing both military and economically viable products," said Simone Miles, an assistant professor at Duke University's Sanford School of Public Policy and a historian of the Soviet Union and U.S.-Soviet relations. So this is going to see an expansion, official expansion, by to men up to the age of 30, which is a lot. Honestly, it's a bit. But we should also consider that there had already been previous reports of boys, to say, as young as 16 being forced into military service. And so if they're expanding it by 3 years, but they're already pulling in 16-year-olds, we can expect it to be pulling in people that are probably a little more older than 30 years, maybe having a different kinds of conscription requirements for those people to serve in other capacity, not necessarily on the front line. Not surprised. Don't be surprised if that happens. Don't be surprised if you hear reports of 40-year-old men being rounded up and thrown into the meat grinder, so to speak. Don't be surprised about that, especially since the official policy is to have as many recruits as possible. But continuing on though, Polish and Lithuania leaders held an urgent meeting on Thursday in a strategically sensitive area where their NATO nations border Belarus and the Russian territory of Kaliningrad. According to reporting from the Associated Press, the leaders warned that they are bracing for provocations from Moscow and Minsk in the area. The meeting came 2 days after 2 Belarusian helicopters threw gleefully at low altitudes into Polish airspace in what was viewed as a provocative move. Both nations on NATO's eastern flank have increased their border security following the arrival of thousands of Russian-linked Wagner Group mercenaries just across their border in Belarus after the aborted mutiny in Russia in June. We reported on this program and talked about it pretty extensively online that I felt that the Prigozhin was actually going to go in and do a full coup. I was wrong. I did not call that right at all. We still do not know if it was a failed coup attempt, if this is some sort of 4D chess move, or whatever else it could be. We don't know what the particulars are. Given the fact that much of the Wagner Group's mercenaries have been integrated into the Russian military forces proper and given new commands, given the fact that Wagner recruiting posters and the like have been taken down in Moscow, and the fact that Prigozhin seems to be still alive and setting up in Belarus, probably a mixed bag. I don't think this is some 4D chess move to put the Ukrainians off their game or massively rearrange troops in some sort of hurried retreat sort of situation with cover of cover of military intelligence and propaganda. I don't think that that's what we're seeing here. I do think that possibly what we're seeing is that Prigozhin simply didn't have the balls to go through it all the way, or never had the intention to and simply wanted to take over the military properly. Given that the military and the Wagner Group were in conflict for much of the last 7 months or so, absent 7 months ago up until last month when the coup, quote unquote, happened. So I don't think, like I said, I don't think this is some 4D chess move. It's possible that what rumors there were online about Prigozhin's daughter being held hostage might have been true, or whatever else. It's also possible that that the president of Belarus, I think it's Poroshenko, Belarus residents. Yeah, Lukashenko, Alexander Lukashenko. It's possible that he actually just brokered a deal. He's like, hey, you just leave the Wagner troops here. They can bolster our defenses here and maybe we'll be all right. And it's possible that that's just what happened, that he actually managed to pull off some diplomatic negotiations to keep Russia in the fight and keep people off his back. Possible. But we don't know for certain. And anybody that says that they know for certain, like I did, or like I hoped for when I said I think it's just blowing smoke. So there you go. Let's see. Continuing on though, Russia and Belarus are increasing the pressure on the borders, increasing the number of their provocations, and we must be aware that the number of these provocations will grow. The Polish Prime Minister said at a news conference with Lithuania's president. The Belarusian foreign minister denied that its country's helicopters entered Poland. Local Polish residents posted photos on social media of helicopters with Belarusian insignias flying above. Polish Prime Minister said that, quote, "Our borders have stopped various hybrid attacks for years. Russia and Belarus are increasing their numerous provocations in order to destabilize the border of NATO's eastern flank. Today, the Polish borders and the border of Lithuania are the borders of the free world, which are stopping the pressure from the despotism from the east." End quote. Why am I in the cyberpunk category? Thanks, Jack and Ard. I'll fix that. Settings. All right. Appreciate it, Jack and Ard. But yeah, so I don't know what's going on with Belarus, the Wagner Group, or Putin versus the Wagner Group. I do know that it seems that the war right now seems to be at not necessarily a standstill, because some territory was gained, but as of right now, it's a slow going counter-offensive. And this is because of numerous mining operations or land mining operations that Russia did, the fact that they've dug trenches and they really dug in for the long haul during the winter of last year, following winter. So what Ukraine is going to need to punch through is probably those tanks. So those tanks need to come as quickly as possible. And the fact of the cluster munitions that they were promised to be delivered needs to get to them, and they need to use them, I wouldn't say sparingly, but smartly, intelligently. That's the proper word. Intelligently against Russian dug-in forces in order to help clear out those trenches. We could definitely see this war dragging on for another 2 years, easily, maybe even 3. But as longer as the war drags on, Putin's position for not winning, assuming they don't push further into Ukrainian territory, gets more and more of his inner circle to potentially turn against him. I still believe that the infighting between the Wagner Group and the Russian military proper is one of those situations, and there's no reason to assume that that is not going to possibly happen again. And if it does, we will be sure to report it on this program here on the Thursday of the week that it does happen. But with that, that concludes our segment about Ukraine. Thanks, Jack. Appreciate it. For the heads up, I do need to bring in the chat here. How you doing, Jack? You doing good? You having a good day? Oh no, gotta relog in. Ooh. Rough week, but survive. Oh man, I'm sorry to hear that. All right. Well, let us continue on with the news roundup. And now we are going to talk about the Trump indictment once again. As the news roundup went to air last Thursday, there was breaking news of a superseding indictment in the special counsel's espionage case against former President Donald Trump. The superseding indictment charged the property manager at Mar-a-Lago for his role in conspiring to delete surveillance footage from a server. The case now carries 40 felony counts against Trump for allegedly hoarding classified documents and obstructing the government's efforts to retrieve them. It's scheduled to go to trial on May 20th of 2024. This week, the former president was indicted for a second time by special counsel Jack Smith. According to reporting from Time magazine, federal prosecutors have accused Trump of trying to overturn the outcome of the 2020 presidential election to falsely claim victory. The investigation into his efforts to remain in power after losing the election follows the work of the House Select Committee that investigated the January 6, 2021 attack on the Capitol. The Select Committee voted in December of 2022 to refer Trump and his attorney, John Eastman, to the Justice Department for prosecution. Smith's prosecutors have alleged that Trump repeatedly lied about voter fraud. urged Republican state officials to undermine the results in states that Joe Biden won, assembled a false slate of electors, and pressured Vice President Mike Pence to unilaterally reject the election results. The wide-ranging effort to hold on to power led to the January 6, 2021 insurrection, when a mob of Trump supporters stormed the Capitol and disrupted the Electoral College certification. A Washington grand jury voted to indict Trump after hearing months of testimony from his former aides and administration officials, including his vice president, Mike Pence. Here is the press announcement from Special Counsel Jack Smith, which we will turn to.
Good evening.
Oops, hold on.
Today, an indictment was
Technology, man, can you dig it?
Good evening. Today, an indictment was unsealed, charging Donald J. Trump with conspiring to defraud the United States, conspiring to disenfranchise voters, and conspiring and attempting to obstruct an official proceeding. The indictment was issued by a grand jury of citizens here in the District of Columbia, and it sets forth the crimes charged in detail. I encourage everyone to read it in full.
Which we will be doing so. Well, I will be doing so. I will not read the full thing on stream. That is way too much. But we'll be getting into some of the charges here shortly. With that said, I think there's one thing that we should note here is that a lot of people that are backing Trump are jokingly saying that the jury of his peers, quote unquote, is impossible to have in DC because DC overwhelmingly voted Democrat. That's not what peers mean. Peers doesn't mean actually like people that are like you necessarily. It just means a jury of people in the district in which you were a charged and a criminal thereof, because everybody is on quote unquote equal footing. And it means that you're not going to necessarily have somebody that is lording over you like the old British system they're in, which is why we created the system that we created. So don't let them get away with that one. Well, let's continue. It only goes on for about 3 minutes.
The attack on our nation's capital on January 6th, 2021 was an unprecedented assault on the seat of American democracy.
True.
As described in the indictment, it was fueled by lies.
It was.
Lies by the defendant targeted at obstructing a bedrock function of the U.S. government, the nation's process of collecting, counting, and certifying the results of the presidential election. The men and women of law enforcement who defended the U.S. Capitol on January 6th are heroes. They're patriots, and they are the very best of us.
All right. So just to bring that up here, let me go ahead and grab another thing. Hold on, I meant to pull this up. Police officer, medal. Shoot, where is it? And 6. Well, regardless of which, the police officer who managed to distract the mob from getting into the Senate chambers right before they had fully evacuated all the senators to another location in order to be in more safety, was awarded a Medal of Valor for his efforts. He lured the mob away from the chambers by distracting them and getting the attention on him. They were about to breach or at least try to go into those chambers. And had they succeeded, I don't know what would have happened. And so what Jack Smith is saying here, the police officers that valiantly defended the Capitol as best as they could, are in fact heroes. Even if you want to say that Trump did nothing wrong, there were people in the crowd that wanted blood. If they would have gotten their hands on a couple of politicians, I don't know what would have happened. You don't know what would have happened. The crowd was stoked There were people, the fires of the crowd were stoked. There were people in the crowd that were committing violence against the police officers to get into the Capitol to do things that we don't know what would have happened. Not necessarily every single person that was there had murderous intent, but a mob violence, mob mentality is very much a thing. And so for that, we should commend those police officers, just as Jack Smith did here. But let's continue.
They did not just defend a building or the people sheltering in it. They put their lives on the line to defend who we are as a country and as a people. They defended the very institutions and principles that define the United States. Since the attack on our Capitol, the Department of Justice has remained committed to ensuring accountability for those criminally responsible for what happened that day. This case is brought consistent with that commitment, and our investigation of other individuals continues. In this case, my office will seek a speedy trial so that our evidence can be tested in court and judged by a jury of citizens. In the meantime, I must emphasize that the indictment is only an allegation and that the defendant must be presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law. I would like to thank the members of the Federal Bureau of Investigation who are working on this investigation with my office, as well as the many career prosecutors and law enforcement agents from around the country who have worked on previous January 6th investigations. These women and men are public servants of the very highest order, and it is a privilege to work alongside them.
And that's it. All right. So let's get into more of the nitty-gritty here. The indictment, like those that have gone before, is a so-called speaking indictment. The facts of the case are laid out in painstaking detail, and we join the special counsel in recommending everyone take the time to read it in full. Let's take a closer look at the indictment now, though. Trump has been charged with 4 crimes in the investigation. In the 45, okay. Hold on a second. Do I want to pull this on screen? That's kind of the point, right? Yeah. All right, so we're going to pull up the 4 cases on the screen here now and go over them really quick. All right. Donald Trump, the defendant Donald Trump was 45th president of the United States and candidate for re-election in 2020. Oh, that's the introduction. It's at page 1. You know what? I'm not going to do this. Because apparently I don't know where page 1 actually starts. Paragraphs 1 through... I hate it when they do this. They don't mean like actual page 1. Here it is. There we go. Found it. Page 1 is actually here. All right. So the allegations contained in paragraphs 1 through 4 of this indictment are alleged and fully incorporated here therein. Page 1 top shows the charges. Oh, that's what you meant. That's what you meant, Nikki. Okay, okay. So count 1 is conspiracy to defraud the United States. Count 2 is conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding. Count 3 is obstruction of an attempt to obstruct an official proceeding. And count 4 is conspiracy against rights. So those are the 4. In the 45-page indictment, the Justice Department accused Trump of repeatedly lying about election malfeasance, even though he knew those claims were false. It alleges that multiple administration officials told Trump there was no widespread fraud that would have changed the outcome of the election. Those people included his vice president, Mike Pence, senior DOJ officials, Director of National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe, and senior White House attorneys. The indictment also details private phone calls in the days before the January 6th attack between Trump and Pence, who took contemporaneous notes of those conversations. The indictment alleges that by the time Trump's efforts to override the election had culminated on January 6th, he exploited the violence by refusing to approve a message directly to rioters to leave the building. Even after the crowd dispersed hours later, Trump would not relinquish his claim that the election was rigged. Quote, the White House counsel called the defendant to ask him to withdraw any objections and allow the certification, the indictment says. The defendant refused. The ex-president continues to claim that the 2020 election was stolen from him. In a post on a social media platform published shortly before the DOJ announcement, Trump called the indictment fake and accused Smith of trying to interfere with the 2024 election. From what we can gather from various reporting, this seems to be the defense that Trump will attempt to mount in this case. Obviously, there has been no 2024 election interference, given that there has yet to be even a primary. Everyone knows that Trump is the presumptive nominee because he's got so much support among Republicans. But the fact is of the matter, it hasn't really even started yet to a degree that it does. And if anything, this kind of helps him with the base. Now, it should also be noted that Trump is going to try to do the defense of a free speech defense. He's going to invoke the fact that everything that he did was in the confines of this First Amendment and therefore should not be seen as illegal. But the First Amendment does not prevent holding people accountable for fraud. And the fraud statute that they are linking here is very broadly written to include a number of different things, which does not necessarily require Trump to have defrauded for money, but can have defrauded for other reasons. Lying to people and getting them to sign on to a scheme that they are not actually wanting to be a party of, especially after stoking the flames of violence, which is what was evident by January 6th that happened. Especially with all his co-conspirators, where they're like, we have to go into combat. Where is that? Oh, where is it? Where is it? It's trial by combat. Trial by combat. Giuliani. This is a good one. Here we go. Like, this is the kind of shit we have in here. All right. Now,
with VMware Cloud Flex Storage, you can scale storage and compute independently of each other.
No. I hate ads, dude. Maybe I'll just clip this in. I'll just clip this in later, but it's important, so we're going to do it now anyways, because it's already up, basically. All right. Unmute. Hurry up. Seriously? Oh, you're going to do that thing? Because I muted? Oh, come on. Okay, no. We'll just clip it in later. Point is that Giuliani said trial by combat, and therefore we're going to see that. So Jack Annard is pointing out here that the conspiracy against rights statute prohibits two or more persons from conspiring to injure, threaten, or intimidate a person in any state, territory, or district in the free exercise or enjoyment of any rights or privilege secured to him or her by the Constitution of laws or the laws of the U.S. In this case, we're talking about the fact of voting. So there you go. All right, nose itches. So that's what we're seeing there as well. So where was I? Jesus fuck. Can't win today, dude. Can't win today with this my nose. All right, but anyways, so Giuliani demanded trial by combat. They were stoking the crowds. They were saying the election was stolen, that they have to fight to take the country back, etc., etc., etc. And so even though these might be things that are free speech under the law, these are also things that could be played into the things that Trump and his team actually did, which were trying to defraud voters in the government. So that is why this isn't necessarily a strictly free speech argument. You can say anything you want, but once you start to put plans into action in order to overturn a duly elected official or the duly held election, then you are in violation of the law, and your speech or that can be against the law. All right, let's continue on though. So while the indictment does not specify, starting over. So while the indictment does not specifically name the 6, some have been confirmed by reporting, and the descriptions provided relevant clues for others. Let's dive into these 6 before we move on. Co-conspirator number 1. Federal prosecutors described this individual as, quote, an attorney who is willing to spread knowingly false claims and pursue strategies that the defendant's 2020 re-election campaign would not. Rudy Giuliani has confirmed that his client is co-conspirator number 1. Co-conspirator 2. The federal indictment against Trump says that he picked co-conspirator 2 to join co-conspirator 1 to make public remarks before Trump spoke on January 6. Attorney John Eastman has confirmed he is co-conspirator 2. Eastman was deeply involved in the plan to send so-called alternate slate of pro-Trump electors to Congress. The slate was indeed fraudulent. What we know about co-conspirators 3 through 6. According to the indictment, co-conspirator 3 is an attorney whose unfounded claims of election fraud According to the indictment, co-conspirator 3 is an attorney whose unfounded claims of election fraud the defendant privately acknowledged to others sounded crazy. Nonetheless, the defendant embraced and publicly amplified co-conspirator 3's disinformation. This is likely Sidney Powell, the release the Kraken attorney who spread multiple lies after the 2020 election, including the Dominion voting machines that had flipped votes. Powell and Giuliani were later sued by Dominion separately over these claims. Co-conspirator number 4 is a Justice Department official who worked on civil matters and who, with the defendant, attempted to use the DOJ to open sham election crime investigations and influence state legislatures with knowingly false claims of election fraud. Again, this is where it comes into the rubber meets the road. These are not strictly free speech issues. Trump can say whatever the fuck he wants. Personally, I don't think that a sitting president with the power of the military behind him should get full free speech necessarily. The military doesn't. Why should politicians necessarily? I mean, let me correct that. I don't think that fraud and lying should be protected under free speech. And especially if you're a politician, you should be held to a higher standard. If someone's telling you, hey, Mr. President, this is not right, and you just willfully ignore them, and it turns out that they weren't lying to you and you should have known better, that should be fraud. That's the way I should say that. That's the way that should be stated. Otherwise, then we get into actual free speech issues where you politicize and weaponize free speech and the taking what is and is not proper speech, yada yada yada. Don't want to do that. So that's the rub. Now, from this description, we know this. Oh, sorry. Co-conspirator number 4 is a department official who worked. Blah blah blah. Okay, where I said that. So co-conspirator 4 from this description is most likely Jeffrey Clark. Clark featured heavily in the House January 6 committee hearings, which revealed that Trump had floated the idea of firing then acting attorney Jeffrey Rosen and replacing him with Clark, an environmental lawyer at the DOJ. Clark embraced Trump's claims about election fraud and supported a plan to push fake slates of electors in several states. This plan led to a confrontation at the White House on January 3rd, 2021, when several Justice Department officials told Trump that they would resign en masse if Clark was pushed to Rosenstein's position. Co-conspirator number 5, according to the indictment, is, quote, an attorney who assisted in devising and attempting to implement a plan to submit fraudulent slate of presidential electors to obstruct the certification process. This person is identified in earlier reporting by the New York Times as attorney Kenneth Cheesebro. I shouldn't laugh, but how your name is Cheesebro? What the fuck? Who worked for Trump's campaign. Politico reported in 2022 that Cheesebro was a lawyer who, quote, helped develop former President Trump's last-ditch strategy to subvert the 2020 election and said he moved to a block of subpoena for his testimony to an Atlanta area jury investigating potential crimes connected to that effort. The indictment accuses Trump and co-conspirators, including Chesebro, of developing a plan to, quote, marshal individuals who would have served as the defendant's electors had he won the popular vote in 7 targeted states, and cause those individuals to make and send to the vice president and Congress false certifications that they were legitimate electors. Those states were Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. According to the indictment, the plan, quote, capitalized an idea presented in memorandum drafted by co-conspirator 5, an attorney who was assisting the defendant's campaign with legal efforts related to the recount in Wisconsin. The memoranda evolved over time from a strategy to preserve the defendant's rights to a corrupt plan to subvert the federal government's function by stopping Biden's electors' votes from being counted and certified. The memo, referred to as the Wisconsin memo, advocated that because of an ongoing recount in Wisconsin, quote, Trump's electors there should meet and cast votes on December 14th to preserve the alternative of the defendant's Wisconsin electors slate in the event the defendant ultimately prevailed in the state, per the indictment. December 14th was the date of the Electoral College Act required appointed electors to vote. A second memo, called the Fraudulent Elector Memo, in the indictment advocated that, quote, the alternate electors originally conceived of to preserve rights in Wisconsin should instead be used in a number of states as fraudulent electors in order to prevent Biden from receiving the 270 electoral votes necessary to secure the presidency on January 6. According to the indictment, the fake electors should, quote, meet and mimic as best as possible the actions of legitimate Biden electors. In other words, commit fraud. Come on. A third memo stated, quote, a third memo, quote, consisted of co-conspirators 5's instructions on how fraudulent electors could mimic legitimate electors in Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, according to the indictment. The indictment says Chesebro called an Arizona attorney who says his idea was, quote, the states have our electors send in their votes, even though the votes aren't legal under federal law because they're not signed by the governor, so that members of Congress can fight about whether they should be counted or on January 6th. In other words, send in the electors in a fraudulent manner in order to buy time and cast the entire election in disarray so that, well, Trump can then use the military to quash any protest that might happen and remain in power. The plot required then Vice President Pence to refuse to count the legally certified electors and send the election back to those states. Trump told Pence to just do that and leave the rest to me and the Republicans in Congress. Co-conspirator 6 was initially more of a mystery, according to the New York Times. As described in the indictment, co-conspirator 6 was, quote, a political consultant who helped implement a plan to submit fraudulent slates of presidential electors to obstruct the certification proceeding. The person could be a number of figures in Trump's orbit, but a close look at the indictment and review of messages among people working with Trump's team provides a strong clue. One of those clues is a December 7th, 2020 email from Boris Epstein, sent to Giuliani and his son, Andrew. It had the subject line, Attorneys for Electors Memo. The email says, quote, Dear Mayor, as discussed, below are the attorneys I would recommend for the memo of choosing electors. And it goes on to identify lawyers in 7 states. Paragraph 57 of the indictment says that co-conspirator 1, Giuliani, spoke with conspirator 6 regarding attorneys who could assist in the fraudulent elector effort in the targeted states, and received an email from co-conspirator 6 identifying attorneys in Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin once again. During the push to overturn the 2020 election, Epstein worked with people inside and outside the Trump campaign as he helped to organize slates of faked electors. Epstein was a strategic advisor to the Trump campaign in 2020 and is currently a top Trump advisor. His current role is helping to coordinate various lawyers in cases where Trump is involved. The existence of that email does not eliminate the possibility that someone else sent Mr. Giuliani a similar note, though. Legal experts say that this indictment is narrowly focused on those charges that Smith believes are the easiest to prove as well. The intention is to try this case before the 2024 election by triggering the so-called rocket docket. However, Trump's attorneys has asked the court to exclude the Speedy Trial Act. The court has ordered briefings on the matter in 5 days. Now, the Speedy Trials Act is supposed to be there for primarily defendants' purposes. And so that's why Trump's team is excluded, is asking the court to exclude it. But I think in the case, the fact that this is where time is of the essence and a lot of judges are not likely to allow a case to be heard during the throes of an election season, they might not be able to exclude it. It depends on who it goes before. It depends on what the government does and maybe any appeals processes and that sort of thing. But this should definitely get to trial as quickly as possible. It is to Trump's benefit to drag this out longer because then, like I said, the judges in question are not likely to have the case be heard until after the conclusion of the 2024 election. So we're talking, November 2nd. However, even though that's the case, it should be, not. So kind of lost my train of thought there. All right. Now this is a long one. Let's continue on though. This is a good one. Ugh. Allergies are just kicking my ass today, bro. Rocket docket is a double-use term. One that's the Jack and Art is saying rocket docket is a double-use term, one to describe speedy trial, the other to overwhelm your opposition by making them try multiple cases in multiple courts at once. Ah, true. Okay. Thanks. Fair point. Fair point. All right. So the judge in this case, is U.S. District Judge Tanya S. Katkun, who was randomly assigned to oversee Trump's cases in Washington. Appointed by former President Barack Obama, Chutkan has emerged as one of the toughest jurists in cases against January 6 rioters. She has previously squelched an effort by Trump to use executive privilege to withhold White House communications from the House Select Committee investigating the Capitol riot. Quote, "Presidents are not kings, and the plaintiff is not president," Chutkan said in her November 2021 ruling. Chutkan will have broad authority over both the pace of the proceeding and a slew of pretrial litigation. Let's move on to the arraignment. So Trump appeared Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in D.C. federal court for arraignment on these new charges. He was formally arrested, digitally fingerprinted, and faced the magistrate judge. The Independent reported that the judge had read the charges and explained the penalties Trump could face if convicted. He faces a potential sentence of 55 years if found guilty of the charges in this indictment, as well as a high dollar fine amount. She addressed the ex-president as Mr. Trump and advised him of his rights to remain silent and his right to an attorney. After explaining each right, she asked if he understood. Each time he said yes or yes I do. John Lauro, the attorney for ex-president in this indictment, entered a plea of not guilty on all counts on his behalf. The magistrate warned Trump that the most important condition of his release is that he not commit any crimes while awaiting trial. Quote, "I want to remind you, it is a crime to intimidate witnesses or retaliate against anyone for providing information about your case to the prosecution or otherwise obstruct justice. Do you understand the warning, sir?" Trump nodded yes. And this is important because Trump has already been accused of potential witness tampering. So there you go. She told him he would face pretrial detention or harsher sentences if he violates these conditions. She also warned him of the consequences of failing to appear for future court dates. Asked if he would comply, the ex-president appeared to answer in the affirmative. At that point, the judge ordered a pretrial service officer to swear him to abide by the conditions, which he then signed in the magistrate judge's presence. The magistrate judge set the first hearing in the case for 10 a.m. Eastern Time on August 28th. The magistrate told Trump that the judge, Katkun, was willing to waive Trump's appearance at the first hearing if he wants. U.S. court officials often provide an overflow courtroom and a video feed to accommodate public interest for high-profile proceedings in Washington. For Trump's arraignment, they opened 2 rooms with a space for 150 people. Those auxiliary courtrooms were mostly silent and empty. Only about 30 members of the public ventured to downtown Washington D.C., observers said, 1/3 as many as news media reporters. Outside the courtroom, journalists far outnumbered demonstrators. A group of about 50 pro-Trump indictment demonstrators gathered on the National Mall as well. So this one's a long one. I'm going to pause here really quick. I need to get some water. I did not drink enough water, so I will be right back. It will only be 40 seconds or so. So let me do that. All right, we're back. Thank you for waiting, everybody. Appreciate you. All right, let's move on now to Trump's reaction. So the Daily Hampshire Gazette reported that former president was also active on social media on Thursday, casting his indictment as a sacrifice for his supporters, stating that he was heading to Washington to be arrested. "It is a great honor because I am being arrested for you. Make America great again," Trump wrote in a statement. Another post said, quote, "The latest fake case brought by crooked Joe Biden and deranged Jack Smith, lies, lies, and more lies, will hopefully be moved to an impartial venue, such as the politically unbiased nearby state of Virginia," Trump wrote. "Impossible to get a fair trial in D.C., which is over 95% anti-Trump, and for which I have called for a federal takeover in order to bring our capital back to greatness." I mean, it's possible to change a venue will be done. I don't think Virginia is necessarily the place he wants it, though. Like, Virginia isn't that conservative anymore, bro. I'm just saying. I'm sure Jackenard knows this. Or he knows. So in the 2020 presidential election against Democrat Joe Biden, Trump won about 5% of the vote in Washington, while he won 69% in West Virginia. It is highly unlikely that the venue will change in this case, though. And that was West Virginia. Yeah, West Virginia. It is highly unlikely that the venue will be changed, though. Trump spoke briefly to... Okay, so I was wrong. Let me restate this. So he said West Virginia. I was thinking Virginia, not West Virginia. Yes, he won West Virginia, so he wants to be closer there. Sorry about that. So it is highly unlikely the venue would change in this case. Trump spoke briefly to the press before boarding his plane for a flight back to his Bedminster, New Jersey golf club, according to The Guardian. He said it was a sad day for America, and that it was also very sad to drive through Washington, D.C. and see the filth and decay. This is not the place that I left. My God. Does anybody buy this? But seriously. Does anybody buy this? My God, dude. Washington, D.C. is a wreck since Joe Biden moved in. Neighborhood property values went down since they moved in. These damn Democrats destroying all cities. Jesus fuck, dude. Seriously, do people really buy that? That DC just in the course of 2 years just went to the shit? Come on, dude. Come on. Continuing on, Trump stated, quote, "When you look at what's happening, this is a persecution of a political opponent. This was never supposed to happen in America." Yeah, okay. No, that's not, I mean, it's not the reason that it's happening. Just because you're running for office isn't a get out of jail free card, my guy. Have a seat. Have a seat. But yeah, it's just nonsense, dude. Yeah, Nikki, I know. It's just ridiculous. Like 38% of Republicans buy that DC is shit now since Biden moved in. Yeah, like Biden moved in, just got dementia all over the place, guys. Just kissing children and being affectionate, and god damn it, we're just not gonna have that here. Now, there are other cases against Trump, though. In addition to the 2 federal indictments, Trump faces 34 counts in New York, which allege that Trump falsified business records to conceal hush money payments to an adult film star. Trump has petitioned the court in that case, to move the matter to federal court. The judge rejected the petition on July 19th. The case will remain in New York State Court. A trial date has been set for March of 2024. Trump is widely expected to face another criminal prosecution in the state of Georgia, where Fulton County District Attorney Fannie Willis is investigating his alleged attempts to overturn the 2020 election results in that state. Georgia indictments are expected later this month. We should also mention here that the former president is considered innocent of all charges until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law. That said, we know where the evidence lies right now, and there's more evidence that will probably come out during trial. So there you have it. Now, how is this all impacting polling for Trump? So according to reporting from Reuters this afternoon, about half, yes, half of Republicans would not vote for Donald Trump if he were convicted of a felony. This is a sign of severe risk his legal problems pose for his 2024 presidential bid, according to Reuters' Ipsos poll that closed today. The 2-day poll asked respondents if they would vote for Trump for president next year if he were convicted of a felony crime by a jury. Among Republicans, 45% said they would not vote for him, more than 35% who said that they would. The rest said they didn't know. Asked if they would vote for Trump if he were currently serving time in prison, 52% of Republicans said they would not, compared to 28% who said that they would. So 28% of Republicans are unreachable. They're unreachable. You're not going to reach these people. You cannot logic a person out of a position they hold that you didn't reach to through logic. So they have to be shooken up a little bit, emotional state shooken up a bit. All right, I'm not saying punch them. This isn't a punch them. It's a shake them. All right, no punching, no punching. But with that said, like they have to be shaken out of it from some emotional attachment that they somehow have for Trump, or they're just going to keep being this loyal. 28% of Republicans is a lot of Republicans that are just to Trump. Okay, just wedded synergized to Trump. And even then, like it's only 45% of say would, if he's convicted of a felony, only 45% said they wouldn't vote for him. That still means that, what, 55% of Republicans would still vote for him if he was, what? Like around 55% or either 35% said that they still would vote for him, and another 10 or 15 would be like, well, I don't know. I don't get it, man. This is ridiculous. You're going to sit here and tell me that if a jury finds this man guilty of all these crimes, that they're still going to be like, still my guy, write him in. That ain't me, bro. It's not me. That's not me. I am willing to give people grace and redemption and all that stuff. Some former criminals are very much reformed and they should be allowed to run for office and yada, yada, yada. But that's not this. This Trump is not going to apologize. He's not going to reform. But with that, that concludes this segment of the news roundup. Now, if there's anything you want to see us cover on the roundup, or if you'd like to join one of our panels, debate me, talk to me, whatever else have you, there are numerous ways to get a hold of us. First and easiest way to get a hold of us is by joining our Discord server. Link above or below, depending on where you're watching this. We are trying to build up our Discord. We have a lot of stuff built in there now. We have an Associated Press bot, so you can get some live news feeds in there. We're going to split that up based on category, environmentalism, law, international relations, yada, yada, yada. So that you can subscribe to it and you can be in the Discord and getting all the news that you want from Associated Press, among others, once I get the bot built out. And you can also just talk to me. We usually hang out in there once every other week or so, just chilling. Next week is not going to be a week that I'm just going to be chilling in there, because I have it's a busy week for me next week, and possibly the week after too. Depends on how work goes. But generally speaking, we'll hang out there once every other week on Wednesdays, just to chill, just chilling, play a video game, whatever. If you want to chill and just talk or whatever, not necessarily on stream, you can join there. You also can join the Tribune Commons on Facebook if you do Facebook groups. I am also on Blue Sky. I don't have a little fancy thing on that yet, but it's a CSP Cypher at Blue Sky. And you can also get a hold of me at Mastodon. Oh, that's why. So yeah, Mastodon at CSP Cypher at Federated Press. All right. Oh, let's get into it now. We got more to cover, so let's go ahead and cover some more news. Now with the economy. And this is some pretty big news, some bad news, some future bad news, all wrapped up into one nice little package. And what am I talking about? I am talking about the fact that the credit agency Fitch has downgraded U.S. credit. So MarketWatch reported today that Fitch Rating pulled the trigger with a historic downgrade of U.S. credit ratings to AA+ from AAA. The rating downgrade of the United States reflects the expected fiscal deterioration over the next 3 years, a high and growing general government debt burden, and the erosion of governance relative to A and AAA rated peers over the last 2 decades. This is manifested in repeated debt limit standoffs and last-minute resolutions, as well as funding the government itself. In Fitch's views, there has been a steady deterioration in standards of governance over the last 20 years, including on fiscal and debt matters, despite the June bipartisan agreement to suspend the debt limit until 2025. The repeated debt limit, political standoffs, and last-minute resolutions have eroded confidence in fiscal management, according to Fitch. In addition, the government lacks a medium-term fiscal framework, unlike most of its peers, and has a complex budgeting process. These factors, along with several economic shocks, as well as tax cuts and new spending initiatives, have contributed to successive debt increases over the last 3 decades. Additionally, there has been only limited progress in tackling medium-term challenges related to rising Social Security and Medicare costs due to an aging population. The downgrade occurred about a month after Congress and the White House secured a last-minute deal to suspend the U.S. debt limit through 2025, putting off the threat of a catastrophe until after the election with the debt default. This chart is a visualization of the path of U.S. debt. This chart is a visualization of the path of U.S. debt relative to gross domestic product since roughly 2000, including Fitch's projections for a rise to 118% by 2025. The lower half illustrates its rising interest payments cost here. So let's zooming in. So you can see all that. So we're looking at debt as a percentage of GDP with an upward swing. Thanks, COVID. All right. So it's up. Oh, look, financial crash. Oh, look, it's steadied out. Lost decade. And then, oops, spike again. Boom. Government net interest payments. Spike down, up, and over. Now, that's the chart. So the initial surprise of the one-notch Fitch downgrade for the stock market appeared to be waning Thursday as the S&P 500 index, Dow Jones Industrial Average, and the Nasdaq I'm just going to restate all that. So the initial surprise of the Fitch downgrade for the stock market appeared to be waning on Thursday as the S&P 500 index, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, and the Nasdaq Composite Index all turned higher in afternoon trades. Importantly, any shock was blunted by a similar move from the S&P Global a decade before, which rattled global financial markets and prompted a further de-emphasis of credit ratings as part of the investment process. Quote, in both cases, the primary reason given for the downgrade was the same: an erosion in confidence over U.S. fiscal governance in the aftermath of an acrimonious U.S. debt ceiling showdown in D.C., said BCA Research in a new client note. Continuing on, they stated, quote, Fitch also cited a worsening near-term outlook for U.S. debt dynamics in its list of factors leading to the downgrade. Researchers at BCA also said this, quote, investors will learn to live with the U.S. no longer being a AAA country. Another thing that should be pointed out here is that Fitch is expecting a mild recession going from starting at the end of the year, so Q4 of 2024 or 2023 into Q1 of 2024. So they're expecting a mild recession to happen at the end of the year. I have on this program been saying that is a possibility, especially with Federal Reserve rate tightening. They could tighten us into a recession, and that is bad. The reason that they are looking at this possible recession is a couple of factors. They are looking at, one, what I just mentioned, the Federal Reserve's continued increase in the interest rates. So that's one reason. The second reason is that they're seeing that the amount of new job openings continues to be highly elevated without enough labor to come into those jobs. Those jobs have debt backed by them, and if they can't fill them in to fulfill those orders, they suspect that it is possible that the unfilled jobs could lead to a small recession. And they also assume that because of these two things, they are expecting the U.S. Debt to increase further, and also expecting the tax cuts that were instituted under Trump to be made permanent, thus also increasing the time horizon of how little revenue the government is bringing in. And so those are the short-term issues. The longer-term issues is that there hasn't been any resolution on Social Security and Medicare payments. The government could just pay them; it wouldn't matter. I don't know why everybody's got their head wrapped around the axle in this, but that's what's going on. So that's why they're saying these things. The ability of the Fed to tighten us into a recession is fairly high. But with that said, I think they are immensely underestimating the amount of economic activity that the IRA and the Inflation Reduction Act, to be specific, and the infrastructure bill and the CHIPS Act are going to do with jobs, because that money has only started to go out recently. Okay. So if that money is going out now and into 2024, the likelihood of a recession happening is lessened by that. It's lessened by that because the federal government is pushing up jobs and pushing up economic activity right when they're expecting a recession to hit. Generally speaking, if there's a lot of money coming out of the federal government into the general economy, that has a GDP increasing effect. So I don't see it happening. It is still possible. I'd say it's under 50%, but it's over 25% of it happening. So between 26% and 49% chance of happening for a recession. And if there is a recession, it's going to be very mild. It will be like the recession, quote unquote, that we had, what was it, earlier last year, late last year, earlier this year, of where we had 2 consecutive GDPs of negative growth. And then those were revised upwards to be like, oh, you know what? We actually had a percentage point of growth. It's going to be that mild. Most people aren't going to notice it. I don't see most of people noticing it. I don't think it's going to lead to massive job losses. It's not going to be the 2008 crash again. None of that is going to happen. We just don't have, we have too good of demographic trends behind us, as well as money coming in from the federal government to hit us, give us that tailwind to help prevent a recession. Well, let's continue on though. So Reuters also reported that the U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen spoke at an Internal Revenue Service contractor office, saying that the ratings agency announcement failed to take into account a resilient U.S. economy, as I just said, with low unemployment, falling inflation, continued growth, and strong innovation. Yellen called the downgrade entirely unwarranted because it ignored improvements in governance metrics during the Biden administration and the country's economic strength. Now, the governance thing that Biden has done is actually a positive, but Congress is more acrimonious right now. They're butting heads a lot more. So it's kind of a wash. But that's where we're at with that. Now, let's look at the economy in a snapshot right now. Quote, recent incoming data has made us reassess our prior view that a mild recession in 2024 is the most likely outcome for the U.S. economy, according to Bank of America's economist wrote in a note on Wednesday per Bloomberg. This is contrary to where Finch is looking at. Now, they are pointing to a solid economic growth and a near record low unemployment rate. In doing so, the Bank of America is joining a rising chorus saying that fears of a recession were unfounded. All of the potential harbingers of a recession haven't actually brought the economy, all the potential harbingers of recession haven't actually brought the downturn that many were forecasting. And as Neil Duda wrote from Insider, quote, the economic doomsday clock has been reset. U.S. labor productivity logged its biggest increase in the second quarter in nearly 3 years, helping to offset rising labor cost. According to figures out today from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, productivity or non-farm business employee output per hour rose at 3.7% annual rate in the second quarter. This is after registering a decline in the first 3 months of the year. The median estimate in a Bloomberg survey of economists had called for a 2.2% rise. Unit labor cost of what a business pays employees to produce 1 unit of output rose at a 1.6% rate after surging 3.3% rate in the prior period. So this means that it's costing businesses less money to put out a unit of output than it did in the last period. Now, Thursday's report showed hourly compensations jumped 5.5%. Adjusted for inflation, though, it rose 2.7%, making the first increase in almost a year. That means real wages went up by 2.7%. The rise was bolstered by the first drop in hours worked since 2020, which was concentrated in manufacturing. Non-farm business output rose 2.4% as well. So again, as I stated previously, the economy is doing fairly well. It might not feel like it to you. Okay, I get it. You have a family. The increases of prices are still eating your budget away, right? I completely understand. You're spending more money now than you did a year ago. 100% justified to feel like the economy is not doing well. It should be noted, though, that it is not intuitive that when prices go up, prices going up is generally a sign of a good economy. Prices crashing are generally a sign of a bad economy. And this should be kind of obvious now, especially after the COVID recession. So COVID, gas prices. This is something that a lot of people have been putting up on social media. All right. So I'm just going to pull up this image really quick here, if I can get it to open properly. Open image 10. So people, this is not this particular image per se, but images like this of gas being under $2 a gallon. This was during the pandemic. This is when the economy was shut down. Prices cratered because people weren't going out. People were staying inside. Everything, right? But it felt good. If you were still working, you're still making money, it felt good because things were cheaper and you felt like your dollar went further, because it did. It did go further. But that's not a sign of a good economy. Necessarily. There are ways you can have your dollar going further and it still being a good economy. For example, wages going up and prices remaining relatively stable. That could still be a sign of a good economy. But like I said, prices going up as significantly as they are is showing a lot of demand for products, or a lot of constrained products, a lot of supply constraints. And if people are still able to buy products, they're still working, and they're still doing that, and it's not making results in job losses, then the economy is doing at least okay. Not great necessarily, but at least okay. And given the fact that we have 9-ish million jobs openings, and people are still continuing to see wage increases, and we're seeing actual wage increases adjusted for inflation. So people's take-home pay went up by 5.5%. Their ability that translated to a 2.7% actual increase in pay. That's what's going on here. But your largest expenses, housing, still going up a lot, so it's really expensive to live unless you locked in that good interest rate during the pandemic. So your cost for housing is going up, and food prices are up. They're not going up as much as they were, but they're still up than they were a year ago. So those are your two biggest expenses. So you're probably not experiencing the amount of money spending that you could had those things not been true. So I get it. But it should be stated again, the economy is doing okay. At least okay. I think it's doing good, but at least okay. But that concludes this segment of the News Roundup. Okay. All right, let's continue on with some more news here. Oh, man. Thirsty. All right. We're going to get into some news bites. Things don't really fit in other spots, but are still important to report on. And the first thing that we're going to talk about here is the America First Legal Foundation. What is that? Let's get into it. So according to the nonprofit organization Influence Watch, America First Legal Foundation is a right-of-center nonprofit organization formed by former senior Trump White House advisor Stephen Miller and Jean Hamilton counsel to the Attorney General in February of 2021. I don't know how it can be considered right of center if Stephen Miller is on it and is a founding member, but whatever. The board is made up of former Trump administration officials, including White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows and former Acting Attorney General Matthew Whitaker. Trump endorsed the organization upon its launch in April of 2021. It has the stated goal of challenging Biden administration policies in court and has worked with state attorney generals to litigate cases against some of Biden's policies. The foundation joined the state of Texas in suing the Biden administration over its border enforcement policies and is paying the legal cost of that case. Interesting. I wonder how that is legal. So Texas is suing the federal government for lack of border enforcement on behalf of the state of Texas, and Miller's group is paying for that cost. No, it makes sense that it's legal. It's considered, this is going to be a speech issue, right? So it makes sense that it's legal, but it's very interesting that this private group has this much sway over what is and is not considered to be legatable, I guess to say. So this lawsuit, though, alleges that the Biden administration release of unvaccinated illegal immigrants is exposing more Texans to COVID-19. All right, so first up, they were giving them vaccines. They weren't forcing them to take vaccines, but they were giving them vaccines. The government doesn't force American citizens to get vaccines. The government doesn't force anybody to get vaccines. This might be a human rights violation. Now, there's certain mandates that if you work in a certain job, you have to get a COVID vaccine. Military being one of those. That's not a human rights violation to have that as a what is the word I'm looking for? It is not a civil rights or human rights violation to have that be required for a certain occupation. A condition of employment. That was the word I was looking for. Condition of employment. So, yeah, I don't see how this could make more. I mean, this is also the Trump administration. They don't think the COVID-19 is that big of a deal. So. Now, the group issued a 7-page complaint condemning a proposed rule from the U.S. Department of Education to provide incentives to schools to teach critical race theory, which the foundation has called thoroughly discredited and odious. Whether or not it's teaching actual critical race theory, come on. You know it's not. Let's be real. So this is what we have. Yeah. We have, this is what they're looking for. Oh, that's the wrong button. Oh, no. There. So this is, the Supreme Court has just ruled that racial preferences, i.e. affirmative action, violates the Constitution. If you are a victim of racist policies at university, corporation, or workplace, contact us at blank or this number. Oh, hi, Pondering Politics. Glad you could join us. Yes. Yes, this is an important thing, too. Further to that point, plus the military has required vaccination since the literal inception of the country. True. True. So, and, they have their website up. So this is their website. All right. Stephen Miller, right of center organization. All right. But essentially what they're doing is they're taking the fight to legal, and you're able to donate money to them and stay informed by texting their thing and getting on their mailing list. And yeah. So it is what you typically expect of a political operation. And that's what it is. It is definitely a political operation. So, and expect it to stay around even after, well, even if, I should say, Trump loses in 2024. This isn't going anywhere. This is where the right of the Republican Party is right now. It will continue to be this way. You will see more of these things happening. We're seeing a new cadre of groups, think tanks, etc., carry the MAGA message of jingoism, or not jingoism, of xenophobia, of populist, right-wing populist sentiment forward, and I don't expect it to diminish anytime soon. Even if we thoroughly destroy Trump in the 2024 election, Biden wins re-election in a landslide, like Trump only gets 2 states. Not going to happen given how politically polarized we are. But even if that happens, it is not going to make the Republicans and their base think anything and change anything, because every loss that they have suffered since Clinton has made them just double down of just saying we weren't right wing enough. Contract with America, Promise to America, the autopsy report that what was his name? Priebus, right? Yeah, Priebus put out. None of it has changed anything. They've just doubled down and gotten worse. So, but that concludes this segment of the Roundup. So, like I said, don't expect them to do anything. All right. We got more to cover, though. Let's go into Wisconsin's gerrymandering here. Let's go into the Wisconsin gerrymandering. All right. So, the New York Times reported on a seismic ideological shift on the Wisconsin Supreme Court that may spark a change in the election maps in the state. A coalition of voting rights groups and left-leaning law firms filed a legal challenge to the state's legislative districts. They argue that the districts were unconstitutionally gerrymandered and that new maps should be drawn before the 2024 election. The petition, filed on behalf of 19 voters in Wisconsin, comes after Justice Janet Partosky has sworn in on Tuesday night, flipping the court from 4-3 conservative to lean 4-3 liberal tilt. In April, the justice won the most expensive state Supreme Court race in American history after campaigning on abortion access and arguing that the state's legislative maps were rigged. For years, Wisconsin has had some of the most aggressively drawn partisan gerrymanders in the country. I will say it once, I'll say it again, I'll keep saying it. Gerrymandering should just not be legal. It is undemocratic, and to the victors go the spoils shouldn't reinforce your spoils every 10 years. So there you go. Now, Republicans have held strong majorities in both chambers of the legislature since 2011, when GOP lawmakers under former Governor Scott Walker, a Republican, drew maps that heavily favored his party. The latest legal maneuver seeks to have new maps drawn by next March. It also requests that the state Supreme Court take, quote, original jurisdiction of the case, meaning that it would immediately be heard by the justices and would not be referred down to district or circuit level courts. If successful, it would require every assembly seat and every Senate seat to be redrawn and elections for all of them to be held next year, including for Senate seats that are not otherwise up for re-election in 2024, state Senate seats. Should the court order new maps for Wisconsin and untangle the gerrymander, the battle for the Wisconsin legislature is likely to become one of the most closely contested in the country. The state has The state already has a Democratic governor in place through 2026. And if the state swings Democratic in 2024, liberal activists dream of a blue trifecta in the critical battleground state could come closer to reality. Could be similar to what's happened in Michigan. In just the past 2 months, both Alabama and Louisiana were ordered by the U.S. Supreme Court to redraw their maps to create a second In just the past 2 months, both Alabama and Louisiana were ordered by the U.S. Supreme Court to redraw their maps to create a second majority black district in each state. Wisconsin is the latest example of how the political makeup of a state Supreme Court often determines whether gerrymandering maps endure or are struck down. Wisconsin state's legislative maps have remained largely unchanged over the past decade, and their partisan tilt has been obvious in the battleground states' tightly contested elections. In 2018, for example, Mr. Walker lost by roughly 30,000 votes, a margin of just 1 percentage point. But Republicans still won 63 of the 99 state assembly districts. Now, why is this important? This is important because a lot of things that liberals, progressives, leftists want to have happen are actually done on the state level. Criminal justice reform, environmental regulations, the ability to give welfare money is all block granted, etc. Like, as much as people say that the federal government has too much power over states and is still too large, a lot of that was deconstructed in the 90s under welfare reform and the like with President Clinton and the Republican majority of 96 to 2002. Somewhere about there. So a lot of it was changed, and it gave Republican governors a lot of leeway, and then Republican legislatures were able to piggyback off of that, etc. And so a lot of the stuff that we care about is done on the state level. And when you have such a gerrymandered state where your governor loses the election by a single percentage point, which if it was a proportional representation system, you would expect to have roughly 50% Republican, roughly 50% Democrat, to go 63 up to 99 seats, of 63% of the seats, to have a supermajority? Come on. That's not right. And having gerrymandered districts to this level, or at all actually, only increases partisanship. Because what we see is that we see a culture between different states being solidified going to Congress, and that's just creating more butting heads. If a state that is purple actually sends people to Congress to reflect their purple state, then they are less likely to butt heads because they are going to be more in common. There's still going to be a lot. There's going to be a lot disagreement, but there's going to be a little bit more overlap because it kind of, with competitive districts, kind of forces moderation in what a first past the post voting system would typically do. That's what typically they're supposed to do. If you have districts in a first past the post voting system and the districts are evenly divided, then it's supposed to encourage compromise because, hey, the next election, if you just step off the cliff a little bit too much, step off to the left or the right a little too much, you're going to get voted out because that's not where the voters are, because the voters are evenly split. But the partisan gerrymandering makes that less likely and makes it reward the extremes of a party, because it's going to be, if a district is 70% Republican, then what determines who wins the election isn't the general election in a first past the post voting system with that many of a party representative in the voters. It's who runs the primary and who votes in the primary. The primaries voted are mostly going to be party loyalist and more extreme, more diehard, more ideologically consistent, more ideologically driven in the party. And those are the people that are beginning. That's how you get Marjorie Taylor Greene. That's how you get Matt Gaetz. That's how you get freaking how you freaking get Lauren Boebert, or the guys in Jim Jordan. That's how you get all these people. You get them because that's who your voters want, even though they might be in a district that's more 40% Democrat because of how the primaries are set up and what the primaries setup looks like from a voting perspective. So there should be a lot of things that we change in the country, especially around how the vote's done, especially how we set up districts, because it's metastasizing. If you can't see that it's metastasizing, I don't know if you've been paying attention. This has all been metastasizing. It's been doing this since 2000, at the very least, since 2000. We could probably take it back to the 80s, but at least in my mind, since 2000, Newt Gingrich, 96 maybe, somewhere around there. And it's just getting worse. And it's only going to get worse because in order for Democrats to maintain power in Congress if states are gerrymandering, if red states are gerrymandering to such an extent that they don't get anybody in Congress that is a Democrat from those states. It's impossible. Then they have to gerrymander their states even more. And we all know that the Northeast is a bit different than the South. It's a bit different than the California. It's a bit different than the Midwest. And so there's less, and culturally speaking, there's differences there too. From worldview, at least. Some of the stuff is window dressing. We're still all Americans, right? But there is differences as far as cultural proclivities when it comes to how to handle crime, how to handle poverty, what religion people are, etc. And those things matter when we're talking about trying to make legislation, trying to pass laws, trying to find fixes to America's problems. So all this stuff, all this gerrymandering is making things worse, which is why it's good to see a gerrymander get taken apart, and hopefully that's what happens in Wisconsin. And when it does, or if it doesn't, we will be sure to let you know on this program. But with that concludes this segment of the News Roundup. Let's see. All right, let's talk about the Libertarian Party. Yeah, they're still a thing. And everybody knows that the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire is definitely wild. So according to Mediaite, the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire appeared to endorse the January 6, 2021 Capitol riot in a Twitter post just yesterday. Quote, "Politicians should fear for their safety on a daily basis," the party wrote, attached to a photograph showing members of Congress and congressional staffers hiding during the infamous Capitol riot. After a Twitter user accused the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire of flat-out endorsing terrorism, the party replied, quote, "One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter." Coincidentally, just hours after the party's initial post, Capitol Police responded to a possible active shooter situation at the Capitol building. There's an active shooter at the Capitol, hoping that innocent civilians as well as Thomas Macy don't get shot. The Libertarian Party of New Hampshire reacted. The incident was later found to have been a false alarm, sparked by a potential bogus call. The party is known for its controversial and attention-grabbing statements. Just this week, the party tweeted neo-Nazi David Lane's 14 words, replacing the word white for libertarian. Wow, that's not a dog whistle at that point. Okay. It's the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire. The Mises Caucus has taken over the Libertarian Party. They're not even trying to hide this. And while I don't think that liberals and left need to jump at every dog whistle that's possible to hear, for us to hear, because it kind of makes us look like deranged lunatics at times, this isn't much of a dog whistle. They know what's going on. They know what they're doing. Jesus fuck. Not only that, though, last month the party received backlash. Not only that, though, last month the party received backlash for suggesting that former Ohio State Senator Nina Turner should pick crops for free. Quote, "You shouldn't pick crops for free because you're black. You should pick crops as reparations for the rights you violated as a politician," it wrote. Yeah. And there was people I was arguing with about this. They're like, it's not racist. Really? Even if you don't like Nina Turner, and I think she's problematic, that's not something you really say, bro, and not assume that people are not going to take it racist. But here we are, in the year of our Lord, 2023, still having to put the smackdown on libertarians. Libertarians. This is why I stopped associating with them, to be honest with you. Far too many saw my face, my baby face, when I was 22, thinking I was a wide-eyed and bushy-tailed young man. I was, but they thought I was younger, of course. Looking for his way in the world, and they wanted youth blood. And for whatever reason, they were comfortable in saying some horrid, racist, or racist-adjacent shit. Similar things like, well, they're just lazy. Or, if it wasn't for affirmative action, I don't think so-and-so would have been hired. Or if, you know. So it doesn't stop. This has been going on since I was politically involved, which was 2007. I was loosely politically affiliated in 2006, 2005. I was only 19 years old back then, 20 years old. So 2008, 2009, I went to different groups. I went to a Libertarian group. I went to a Democratic group. I went to a Republican group. I went to a Green Party group. Went to a bunch of different groups just to get my feel around the political system within Indiana. And Libertarians were that forthcoming with me. And I didn't like it. So that was why that was. And not only that, though. Not only that, continuing on with the Libertarian Party. Oh, wait. Sorry. There is more in regards to this with racism that they had. Because in 2022, the party received criticism for tweeting, quote, America isn't in debt to black people. If anything, it's the other way around. While in 2021, it claimed that racism is pretty much a non-issue in America. Libertarians suffer more oppression than black people. The Free State Project was a mistake. Why? Why are they like this? How is libertarian fascism a thing? Why is the pipeline, the libertarian to fascist pipeline, a thing? It's like, what? Never understood that. I mean, I do to a degree American's history, but I'm saying, like, philosophically, what libertarians are supposed to stand for. They shouldn't be like this at all. It's inane. And furthermore, though, last year, New Hampshire's Republican Governor Chris Sununu called for the abolition of New Hampshire's Libertarian Party in response to its controversial statements as well. So that concludes that segment, the News Roundup. I don't know what's wrong with my nose, it's just so much. About to call it a day. All right. And finally, for our last segment of News Bites, we're going to talk about Newsom versus DeSantis debate. What the fuck is going on there? So after a year of taunting and snipping, Republican presidential hopeful and right-wing Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has agreed to finally meet California's Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom on the debate stage. Fox News host Sean Hannity will moderate the live debate pitched as a showdown of red versus blue policies at the state level, according to the Washington Post. Hannity on Wednesday played a clip from his June interview with Newsom, where the governor said that he was all in to debate his Florida counterpart before cutting to a smiling DeSantis who appeared remotely. Absolutely, DeSantis said in response to the challenge. I'm game. Let's get it done. Just tell me when and where. And he said it with the charisma of a limp noodle. After DeSantis Hannity's appearance, a spokesperson for Newsom said the California governor already sent DeSantis a formal debate offer last Friday. Quote, quote, DeSantis should put up or shut up, the Newsom spokesman said. Anything else is just games. According to the Newsom letter, he proposed a 90-minute debate moderated by Hannity and focused on the impact of representation at the state level. The Fox News hosted event will have no live audience and will air live on November 8th or 10th in a battleground state, either Georgia, Nevada, or North Carolina. You know what? The fact that it's not going to have a live audience is fantastic. I love it. It makes it fair to both candidates. It means no cheering and booing over people. Sean Hannity, you're doing a good thing here. You're doing a good thing. If it stays to it, all right? I will, for one, am looking forward to this entertainment. But again, like, DeSantis isn't going to win presidency. It's not going to help him at all, I don't think. If anything, it's going to hurt him because it's going to show how much Gavin Newsom's going to boom right out of the park on that boy. But yeah, this is fun. This is fun. We'll do a little live reaction for it if we're in town. So the two governors have been locked in an escalating feud for the past year, taking shots at one another on topics such as immigration, abortion, gun rights, and education. Each has portrayed the policies and conditions of the other state as an indictment of their respective parties' politics. While President Biden has often tried to strike a tone of unity, Newsom has emerged as a Democratic leader willing to take the fight to Republicans on high-stake policies such as abortion and LGBTQ rights. He has openly expressed frustration that Republican leaders like DeSantis and Texas Governor Greg Abbott have dominated the national discourse with these and other cultural war issues. In June, he called DeSantis a small, pathetic man. Tiny hands. Both Newsom and DeSantis are term limited for running for governor again and have been eyed by those in their party as presidential contenders in 2028. Although DeSantis is running now, and I don't think he's got a 2028 shot anymore. He should have stayed out of it. He could have stayed out of it and potentially inherited the Trump base. But I don't see that happening now. There's a lot of time between now and 2028. Things could change. But again, he's got the charisma of a wet noodle. This man does not know how to do anything. DeSantis holding beer. Look at this. Look, we're going to turn over this. Please, for the love of God, play the fucking thing without. Come on. No ad. Oh, there's an ad. All right. But yeah, this man has got. You've seen it, I'm sure. There's been memes. There's been video clips. Bro, I don't care. What? Oh, come on. That wasn't even the right. All right, fine. YouTube. DeSantis beer. Is this it? All right, you know what? I can't find it, but he's like being jovial with people and stuff. I'll get it into the clip somewhere, but yeah. Is this the one I'm looking for?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Okay,
Oh yeah. Good one, Nikki. This one's good. This one's good. Look at this. Look at this man's laugh.
crazy. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Okay, don't back down. We won't.
Oh, that's not the laugh. What is this?
Back down. We won't. That's it. Yeah. Okay, don't.
I don't really see something wrong with that one, Nikki. Sorry. I don't get that one. But anyways, I couldn't find the beer. Like, this is the beer one, but it didn't play the right fucking clip.
Yeah, it's good to meet you too. Oh, what is that? An icy? Yeah. Sugar, huh? All right. 4-H, Wayne County. Who else we got?
What else we got? What else we got? I don't know what's going on, guys. Oh, there it is. There's the picture. Look at that. Like, no one looks good holding a beer like that. Like, you hold it from the fucking top and you take the fucking sip, okay? All you're doing is making your hand cold and the beer warm. Stupid. That's why there's cozies. Drinking a Coors Light because they can't do Bud Light anymore. Oh, and when you see the clip, guys, when you see the clip, he does not like the taste of the beer. I don't like it either. Don't get me wrong. Coors Light, Bud Light, fucking Keystone Light, whatever, all those fucking American beers, piss fucking water, okay? They're disgusting. I'll stick by it. I prefer Dos Equis, Modelo, Hefeweizens. These Pilsners, gross. And if that makes me out of touch elitist, I don't give a fuck. But continuing on. Newsom, who the Atlantic last year dubbed the Democrats' new spokesman in the culture wars, has sparked talk of a presidential run. Earlier this year, he formed a political group aimed at fighting rising authoritarianism in red states, though he said in June he would not run against Biden in 2024. Smart man. Meanwhile, DeSantis' presidential ambitions have faced an uphill climb. Early excitement after he announced his candidacy has since turned into a campaign struggling to find its footing. The campaign has burned through cash, laid off 1/3 of its staffers, and fought to overtake the spotlight and the affections of the conservative base from Trump. And sharing Nazi memes and generally online big brain bullshit, okay? All over the place. And it's just not getting traction. Because at the end of the day, Republicans love Trump. The Republican base wants Trump. They want their big orange daddy to wrap them up in his little tiny hands and just give them love and be their avatar and take it to the liberals. Because the madder we get at him, the more they like him. So with that, you know what I say to that? I say, YouTube. I say more. I say this. The madder we get at him, the stronger he gets with the Republican base, and the more likely it is that Biden wins. I say this. All right, but that concludes this segment of the news roundup. Now, for people that may not know, maybe you're joining us for the first time, maybe you haven't stayed with us to the end like you should, we'd like to conclude our news roundup with some news of the weird. And today's news of the weird is kind of creepy because nature is weird, okay? And what we're talking about, we'll just have to look at it. So Jana Clinton was sitting on her back porch watching her son Charlie, age 11, fish in a pond behind their house in Oklahoma, where he suddenly started yelling for her. Quote, he was screaming, "Oh my God, Mom, oh my God," Clinton told NPR. "I thought he was just being dramatic, to be honest. You know, kids, am I right?" she added. Well, let me say that again. "I thought he was just being dramatic, to be honest," she said. "You know, kids, am I right?" Then she got a close look at Charlie's weird catch. Obviously, being in a neighborhood pond, we're used to just catching a few bass or catfish, she said. I mean, nothing with human-like teeth. It turned out that Charlie had landed a pacu, a fish whose outside teeth have long struck fears into swimmers. You've been warned. Why does this fish have human teeth? Why? 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 Ugh. Ugh. For their part, Fish and Game officials say the fish, which is not native to the US and is considered an invasive species, was likely released to the pond by a person who had kept it in an aquarium until it got too large. The pacu can grow up to 55 pounds. In 2013, NPR reported the appearance of the Brazilian fish had sent a chill through summertime swimmers in Sweden and Denmark. The alarming fish isn't much feared. The alarming fish isn't the much feared piranha, though. The pacu is a cousin to the piranha, which has a reputation of attacking men's testicles. But with that I am sad to say that we are out of time. We know you liked what you heard because you stayed with us to the end, so please smash that like button for the algorithms. It really does help us out. We'd like to thank you again for joining us this evening, because without you, we would just be a person shouting into the void of the internet. And while that is fun, it is not nearly as fun as doing it with people that can interact with, and we appreciate y'all joining us this evening. We'd like to give special thanks to our copy editor, Nikki Adams, because without her, this news roundup likely wouldn't happen. It would be maybe a once every other week thing or what have you. She does a lot of work on this, curating news for us, giving me the ability to spend time on reading, getting informed about what my own opinion should be about things. So thank you again, Nikki. Appreciate you. Also like to give a special shout out to our Facebook and Discord communities who share articles with us on a regular basis to help inform this newscast with things that we might have missed, such as News is Weird segments or whatever else might be happening, especially in tech, which doesn't get much play in the national press unless it's some crazy AI thing. With that, again, sad to say that we have to go. So as we say always at Crowdsource Politics, keep your head up through the political storm.